Welcome, Tzvi here. Does stress and fear have to be the first response to every single situation? Feeling stuck, frustrated, restricted, and the list goes on and on. But spiritually and emotionally, we were created to have change in our life. This is what we're going to talk about today, is how we can change the outcome from where we are currently now. It's a learned habit. It can take over our life. What do I mean by that? Well, every single thing that upsets us or seems a little difficult or hard, I'm talking now very, very deeply. We're talking about subconsciously. Which subconsciously happens. As soon as this thing happens, our brain and mind go through the catalogue, and then all of a sudden, how do we respond? With stress or fear. It can be part of the fight or flight situation. A problem comes up, the body goes, oh, how do I react to it? Looks in the catalogue, I get worked up, I get fearful. But in fact, is it real? Yes, it is very, very real, that feeling at the time. We have to understand and accept that the feeling right now, the stress, the emotion, is a response that our body and mind have learned. And the Creator gave it to us for a very good reason. It's there to help us. So that it's a response that we've learned from. So we've got to learn to grow from it. And by understanding it is a response to a certain situation and it's been created. So when we understand we created it subconsciously as a response, it may have come from a response early on in life, or may not be that far, from a situation that could be trauma, very difficult, very hard, that went against what we would want it to have. I don't want to call it a label trauma, but it's an easy way to describe it as an emotional situation that felt very awful and bad. And because we've learnt it that's awful and bad, instead of the Creator gave it to us for a very good purpose. We've learnt it in a stressful way. And it comes stress, and you can feel the body becoming heavy and the body getting tired and sore and painful and then frustrated and all the other emotions, and physically goes through it. It is very, very real. It takes over your whole life. This is what we're talking about. It's learned, it's a response, and it's overloading the system. And as I was just saying, the more this habit goes through the catalogue, there it is, this is a response, the more it becomes predominant, and the more the mind and body realize, that's how you want to respond. And the Creator God Himself says, you want more of this? I'll give you more of this. This is what we're talking about. So what happens? That learned habit becomes stronger. It's like exercising a muscle, that the more exercise it, the stronger it gets, the more you enjoy it. But in this case, the more stressed you get, the more worked up you get. It's a constant vicious cycle that, as it happens over again, because it's very subconscious and you're running on automatic pilot, you're running, I don't want this, I don't want this, I don't want this, I don't want that, I don't want this, I've had this, I've had enough, negative, the body's go, I know that response, I know the response, I know the reaction, I know what to do. And then all of a sudden at the end of the day, you're like, it's too hard, it's too difficult, I don't want to get out of bed in the morning because I can't handle it. It's a learnt response. It may be learnt, you may say it sounds very crazy to learn it this way, but the mind and body does it that way. The Creator wants us to grow. Hashem, God wants us to grow. He's putting it there to help you change in life. But if you keep doing it and you're not waking up, He's going to keep waiting for you. This is what we're talking about, is how to connect and how to move out of that situation. So before I go into solutions, we have to understand there's some very, very deep hidden messages in there. There's certain pains in the part of the body, the certain stresses that come up have a very strong signs. And once you understand what they are, it helps put those little pieces of puzzles together. That is the most beautiful part of it. There is very, very clear signals. And once you start seeing it a few times, you go, I know what that is. It's there to show me and help me change. Because it's like a protection. It's a protection of you emotionally, physically. I mean, it does hurt emotionally, it does hurt painfully. But at the same time, if we didn't have that protection, God forbid, imagine what would happen. You know, we're the only beings on this planet that are made for stress. Plants haven't got the abilities, trees don't have the abilities. We are, and we have to be highly thankful for it. So going back to it, stress is a response to a previous situation. So what do? The mind and body goes, because you're running on autopilot, you're going, I can't handle this, I can't handle that. You're constantly asking for it. So what is the solution? The solution that I know and the most effective, and we learn about it spiritually and physically. They talk about it in psychology now. We talk about it very heavily in the holy books. That the thing is we have to be present right now, and we have to learn to accept what is. Now, it may be extremely painful, that trauma, that situation may have come through an awful, awful situation. I know personally I've had some traumas in my life, and I've learned it through those way and the response. And before you know it, you've taken it on. You've taken on the way of change. You've adapted to it. Your mind and body's done the fight and flight, adapted to it. But it may not be the adaptation that you want, but it becomes automatic. And you just do it. And what happens is like you get upset with yourself because the body's addicted. It's almost like an addiction to keep going into it. That habit is like an addiction of getting upset with yourself, getting stressful. Up, this thing's happen again. Up, bring it back on. It's like an addiction. You keep going over and over it again. But we have the ability to make the changes and live without the stresses. So what is the first and most important key is very, very important, and it's probably the hardest because the mind and body is going to keep distracting you. I know it happens many times, but I've been going through it long enough now that I don't fight it. I don't push it away. I don't try and fix it. I know within time it's going to change because it has happened many, many times before, and Met Hashem, God willing, it'll happen many times more. But right now, I've just got to understand and realize that I've got hooked into an old habit, an old pattern. Neuroplasticity, I know that I've got the ability to change. And I also know that it'll happen again. And I also know the Creator's going to, Hashem, God is going to be there to help me on my journey. So I've got all these extra powers, the Creator, the knowing that I can do it, that I can bring into it. So what you do is got to be aware of it. And once you be aware of it, and just what happens then, you become aware of it, that stress and anxiety just sort of lifts slowly. It's like, oh, I created it again. I don't need to fight it. I don't need to go in that old habit. It's such a relief. It's like letting go. It just all of a sudden changes the whole situation. And what did you do? All you did is acknowledge the situation and realize that stress was created. It just by accepting and acknowledge it, you can actually over time, you like to feel where it is in the body. And as you acknowledge it, you can actually feel the stresses and pains slowly relieve out of the body. You can just sit there. I know I can. Just sit there and just take some deep breaths. Don't even have to be that deep. They can be a little bit more normal breaths, but you're getting your breath in a rhythmic state. There's another little key, is getting it into a calm state, because when you get stressed, anxiety, there's a whole breathing patterns change. You may be holding your breath, you may be biting your jaw, you may be locking your body up. Then you start to feel, well, I've got that position again. I need to just lower my shoulders, relax my jaw, get the lungs working, fully breathing, feel the diaphragm working. And it's almost like it just slowly relieves itself of stress. It may be at first just the smallest bit, it may be nothing, but it's a progress, it's a work in progress. So over time, you'll actually get to feel it differently. You actually be able to see it differently. And it's like, and that is as much as letting go, of holding on to the situation. And what happens over time, you have to put in and visualize what you do want. So we're really training our body that we don't have to live with that stress and anxiety anymore. It become a learned habit and understand, I learned it that way through neuroplasticity and from the Creator, God Himself can help me, and I can create new tracks in the mind how to do it. But the old habits are there, they don't have to be dominant. So we've got to create new ones to make it more dominant by going over it, like exercising the muscle. We're strengthening it, making that one more dominant. We're teaching ourselves, and we're saying that Creator, please help me. This is what I do want. And showing it and showing the body and mind, this is how we respond. It'll be now, when it looks through the cattle, where it is, it'll say, this is a new way. This is what I want. It'll replace it. It's so beautiful and amazing how this happens. The one thing that I want to stress very clearly is that we don't need to fight it. We don't need to fix it. We have to accept it. By accepting, just know that it's there. And the more times that you go through it, the more times you realize that you can make the change. Swap over to what you do want and just enjoy the process. Now, gratitude is very, very powerful. It changed the whole circuitry they've proven inside. So by focusing on what you do want, what do? You start allowing it, and you're saying, the Creator, this is what I want. You say, you appreciate what you have? I'm happy to give you more of it. This is what we're talking about here, how to reprogram it. And sometimes you can be very, very swept away. I know myself, sometimes I've got a big long list of things that I want to do in a short amount of time. I realize, okay, I just need to get through this. I got to do as best I can by breathing and being mindful. But I'm not going to fight it, because I know when I'm finished, I can come back to the place I'd like to be and just accept it. And you know what happens? You get through that thing far more quicker, because you're not trying to get each step of a resistance. No, you just accept it. And within time, the change happens, and you're able to come back to a very pleasant place. And you realize, whoa, look what happened. I can do it. I don't need to go through it. So it becomes new habits, and it's so beautiful. I want to thank you very much for staying through to the end. I appreciate it. If you subscribe, thank you very, very much for helping me build the channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, please join the family and hit the subscribe button. I love reading comments. I get to as many as I can. I appreciate it. Thank you once again.